the Photography Online podcast, in partnership with Kingjoy tripods.
Coming up in our March podcast, we discuss the world's highest resolution full-frame sensor and the tragic case of the tiger blinded by photographers' flashes. We also find out what happened to the Californian drone pilot who grounded a firefighting aircraft during the recent fires. And we decide if the world is ready to pay extra for a garish new series of SanDisk products and look at some new gear from ThinkTank bags.
And now, please welcome your panellists. A man who thought a light meter was a bit shorter than a metric meter. It's Harry Martin.
Is that not what they use in the States still?
And a man who, when asked what he knew about Astro, replied, "I think I'm Aquarius." It's James McCormick.
Gemini, actually. Gemini.
And here to keep them both in check, she's Ruth by name and ruthless by nature. It's only Miss Taylor.
Hey everybody, welcome to our March podcast. James is saying he's Gemini there. I'm actually Aquarius, James. Maybe we got those intros mixed up.
I know, because, being a Gemini, but of course the true Gemini amongst us is Harry, because he's only got half the DNA that any normal person has, because he's given half of it to his brother.
You obviously skipped high school biology.
Anyway, James and Harry, as you'll be able to hear, they're with us today on the podcast. Welcome, guys. Harry, just off the back, actually, of running one of our big workshops, which is our kind of our winter week-long tutorial-ish based, that's a good word, I like that, kind of workshop we run here on the Isle of Skye. How was that, Harry? I know you had some pretty good weather, actually. Well, blue skies, at least.
Yeah, well, considering it's a Scottish island in the middle of winter, we normally lose a day or two to bad weather. And we were, I think it's probably the only one of these workshops which we've been running for nearly 10 years now, where we did every sunrise and every sunset, and it was quite remarkable. But I mean, it's not a bad thing if we do get bad weather, because I say we do a lot of theory-based stuff inside when the weather isn't quite as suitable for photography.
Not a bad time of year as well, Harry, for sunrise and sunset. Not too early and not too late.
Very civilised, absolutely. This is why we don't tend to run something like that in the summer. A lot of people ask because they don't want to travel up to Scotland in the winter. But if you're trying to do that sort of routine in the summer, then yeah, you're up at 2 a.m. out for a few hours of sunrise, and then you just have to spend the day sleep. It's really
so. The
exhausting.
upshot, Harry, is if you want good light and a good lie-in, go in the winter.
Basically.
Definitely the best time to visit the islands. Speaking of, James and I are actually heading out very shortly to the Outer Isles. If you're listening in the UK, you might know the Isles of Lewis and Harris. If not, they're just further out from Skye, basically, and we're very much...
Your homeland, Ruth.
It's so you keep saying. It's my mother's homeland, but yeah, it's somewhere I feel very much at home. So we're heading out there next week, hoping for, good weather, yes, as in sunshine, but also, good photography weather. Bit of a mix of conditions, so we got a fully packed trip. In fact, Harry, you were out there recently as well, weren't you? You have been busy.
I just went for a little bit of a personal week and holiday. It's been a few years since I've run our trips there, just the kind of schedule rotation we have. And I was missing it. It's just such a different set of islands to Skye. And I love it there. And headed out there, got a really great mix of conditions and wind, which is crucial for a lot of the locations there, the beaches, the big dramatic coastal locations, and got some really good stuff. And also to shoot some photographs for an upcoming sort of commercial product that we are hoping to release soon. So just a little hint on that, and I think Marcus might be sort of talking about that a bit more in sort of the next couple of months to come, so keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah, very much so. We'll let you know about that when it is coming out. We're going to move on, though, with our first feature for the podcast this month. In the news, we've got a good few stories for you this morning. First one's actually a continuation of one we mentioned, I can't remember if it was last month or the month before, about the drone pilot over the LA fires. Everybody will have, of course, been aware of that, and we talked about that last month. Somebody who flew his drone into a firefighting aircraft and managed to incapacitate it and caused all sorts of, it was awful, Harry. What's the kind of new story on this one?
Well, it not only grounded the plane for, I think, 2 or 3 days during the height of the blazes out there, which, I mean, if you have somehow not seen the news around those fires, it was devastating, and thousands and thousands of people have lost homes and property and everything that they possibly own. And these are specialised aircraft with the intent of delivering water and dumping it over the fire in an attempt to control it. And there are only 2 of those available in that area during the California blazes. So to have the fleet, what's the word for a group of aircraft?
I think a fleet is fine.
Fleet, whatever. Then that was reduced by half to then not have an additional aircraft to help it. So not only did he damage the aircraft, and I believe it was in the region of $65,000 worth of damage to the wing of the plane, which is no small repair bill. But who knows the impact in terms of sort of financial and personal loss further from what that might have helped save that plane. So it's so incredibly irresponsible, and not just a random member of the public. He is a well-known, at least within the video game community, figure. Previous CEO of various video game production companies. He was involved with the Call of Duty series, quite high profile.
So in other words, he's rich, Harry, so he got a good lawyer and got off.
Well, this is now sort of the major news story in that he has pled guilty in the hopes of avoiding...
I think he has avoided it. He's getting community service, and he's going to pay for the damage. So
it's a federal offence, what he did, so it's should have been at least 12 months in jail. And I think one of the arguments his lawyer put across was that, one of the mitigating factors they described it as, was the DJI no-fly zone information, the geo information on where you can and can't fly, had allegedly failed. And so he didn't know that wasn't an area he could be flying in.
Even though there were fires burning and planes flying.
Just general emergency situation and fires and planes and whatnot. And DJI have now responded and said it will no longer enforce no-fly zones through the DJI Fly app.
So basically do it yourself. And
now it's putting the onus, the responsibility back onto the drone pilots, which is obviously the way it should be.
Yeah.
I don't know in the States, Harry, but in this country we have, I think it's green, amber and red, don't we, in terms of fly zones, but that's done by the CAA rather than by DJI themselves. So in essence, it's yet another drone pilot that's made a mess of it for people that want to fly drones responsibly, which is a bit of a sad thing, really. So, drones can produce quite nice imagery, but they have to be used very, very responsibly, because when you see a picture of the hole that this thing put in a plane, it's quite extraordinary, really. It's a small one, and it's put a thumping great hole in the wing of the...
Yeah. So the DJI Minis, if I remember, somebody I'm sure will correct us.
I think it's a 240. It's under 250 anyway grams. It's one of those.
It's under the 250, so it's not under the same regulations and licensing that larger drones are. And it's a sobering sort of amount of damage and impact that it's caused on an aircraft like that.
Yeah, it is, yeah. So for all you drone pilots out there, please fly them responsibly, because it makes people like me who use them commercially a nightmare. Which is why, funnily enough, Ruth, I don't actually fly one myself. I hire somebody else because...
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Not because you can't do it well, just because...
Well, I could probably learn to do it reasonably well. I don't think it's terribly difficult, but actually you need somebody... You need 2 people to fly a drone responsibly, really. Certainly where I would use them. So you need what's called a spotter and somebody to check all the apps and check all the regulations and do everything properly, but also just somebody to stay on top of what you can and can't do all the time, because the regulations are changing a lot. But this guy's excuse that it's an app is a load of absolute nonsense. What a load of rubbish.
I think in a land of filmmakers, obviously LA, and with everything that was happening, there were a lot of drones up there, and it was only, it was going to happen, wasn't it? Temptation was there. There is more on that if you want to keep up to date on it in the show notes. Do feel free to check that out. Next story we've got here is, I know we do selfie stuff a lot, but it is quite interesting. And this is another story out in Japan. Who wants to go for this one, James or Harry?
Oh, I don't mind. I mean, I've had a quick look at it, and it is about the Japanese authorities, and as you said, we've done a lot of selfie stories, so it's hard to summon up the enthusiasm, to be honest. However,
go on, James.
Well, I'll do my best, because it's about two things, selfies and Instagram, two things that I'm a complete expert in, of course. But there's a street in Japan where it gets very popular with people taking selfies of themselves. Now, I've had a look at this street and I can't understand why particularly.
I think it features, it's not a feature in a film or something, a Japanese film.
Well, it is, but I mean, even so, it does feature in the film. It's a film I've never heard of, and it's a very unassuming looking street. So I can't quite imagine why you would want to take your selfie there, but clearly people do. And now they're hiring sort of security, basically, to manage the situation. But I think it opens it up to a wider point, really, about, well, we've talked a lot about selfies and the danger of selfies, so I don't think we need to go down that particular path again, but I think it opens it up about sort of honeypot locations and what becomes a honeypot location, and how when things are publicised they can get out of hand quite quickly and places basically become ruined, I guess. But there's no real answer to it, because why should one photographer be allowed to go and another not? And why is someone taking a selfie less important than someone that's actually, taking an actual photograph of the street? So yeah,
I mean, this particular street it's a highly residential street. It's very heavy traffic generally. I think that's the problem in this one, is like they're actually,
so it's a mixture of self-D and inconvenience and blocking traffic. So
blocking traffic and people go into people's property, front gardens, things like that,
and real safety, because a lady died in this town, village. It's in the north of Japan, isn't it, Hokkaido?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And a lady died because she was taking a picture and was on the train tracks and failed to notice an oncoming train. And so we can put aside again the whole sort of common sense and sort of lack of general awareness. We do generally have to assume now that people are not going to be responsible for their own well-being and safety, and it is falling to...
Oh, I completely disagree, Harry. I'm sorry, we do have to assume people have to be, otherwise we're in a world it's becoming very dystopian otherwise.
Well, and that's now what we're seeing, they're having to hire police or security guards to manage this.
But I think from a photography perspective, it raises an interesting question, as I said, because it's very easy to be disparaging about people taking pictures for Instagram or selfies of themselves for Instagram. It's one way or the other. It's very easy to be disparaging about that and say that, they shouldn't really be there and only people taking, higher quality imagery should be there. But really it's about, this street, because it's in a film, is popular, just like it would be at the Grand Canyon or the Arches in Utah or wherever it may be. So, some of the hot spots in the Dolomites where you go, Harry, so you now walk further off the beaten track to get away from those hotspots, don't you, really? So I think from a photography perspective, I think you just have to kind of slightly draw a line under it, and the authorities are doing their best to manage the situation by employing, did it say police or security? Either way.
Security guards, I think. So, I mean, that's... Yeah.
Security guards, yeah. So they're doing their best to manage the situation. This particular spot will come and it will go in its popularity, I have no doubt about that. So there won't be people standing there in 2 years' time. You can bet your bottom dollar on that.
So you look at places here like the steam train, the Harry Potter viaduct.
Yes.
That film was out donkeys years ago and they are still coming. Some places are just iconic.
I think Harry Potter is slightly more probably. I don't know about this film.
We don't know what it's like. I mean, the West is one thing. Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, well, maybe I don't know. I've never seen Harry Potter either, so I don't know. But I have stood at that viaduct and I've seen the damage that's done to the ground there. It's a muddy pit half the time of the year. So, but I guess it's managed reasonably well, and the car park is managed reasonably well. And I guess that's what you can do, really, is try and manage these individual locations and not be too pompous about why people are there.
Okay, well, again, more of that in the show notes. There'll be more, I'm sure, selfie-related stories over the next few months or so. Story number 3, Harry, you can introduce this because I reckon you've got a lot to say about it.
Yes, so obviously being the wildlife photographer, I did notice this immediately, and it's not something I'd actually seen the news about, but a tiger has allegedly gone blind because of camera flashes and exposure to light, and has to have its eyes removed, the lenses, and then its eyelids sewn shut in an effort to reduce the pain for this poor animal. So it was a tiger that was used in a tourist type park and for photographs with the public from, when it was a cub, and has now been taken to a refuge in France. And when it arrived, was described as being virtually sightless. And because of the constant flashes that it was exposed to, that's caused this deterioration in eyesight. It had sort of the onset of glaucomas and all sorts, really. So pretty horrible to read. So it does trouble me, because it's a horrible thing for any animal to go through, and especially the big cat industry and lion cubs, tiger cubs that are removed from their mothers at a very young age and then sort of handed around the public for pictures to be stroked, and again, selfies, we could come back to that. But I think it's a huge sort of telltale sign of the way the industry in photography has gone, that has happened to just one individual that we know about. And they tried to, this is a Petapixel story, and they tried to sort of get a specialist to talk about sort of really how much the impact flashes can have on an animal. And while they haven't been able to get a response, there are plenty of other people that have weighed in on the possible impacts. One who was a professor of sensory ecology that says if it's during the daylight, then flash photography, the use of flashes, should have minimal impact on an animal. But all I can think of in my head is we're in awards season for TV and film at the moment, BAFTAs and whatnot. And so even in sort of vague daylight conditions, when you see the paparazzi going with all of those flashes towards people, imagine that being an animal that's highly sensitive. I mean, most animals are way more sensitive.
Yes, so I think one of the points, Harry, you being a zoologist, can make here is that a big cat's eyes, or an owl, or any nocturnal hunting animal has much more sensitive eyes than us humans, basically.
Absolutely, and even so things like owls are really, really susceptible to something like this, driving around and just getting blinded by our headlights. And so, one might argue that, tiger hunts during the daylight as well, so it should be fine. But again, I think it's probably more down to the prolonged exposure this animal must have had to photographs. So is recovering now, but God, what a life for that animal.
On the upside, though, Harry, surely on the upside, animals kept in captivity like this, be it pandas, in the old days bears, circus bears or circus elephants or whatever, which were all kept for entertainment purposes, basically. Occurrences are recurring less and less as stories like this become more and more prevalent. So this animal's been permanently blinded because of sustained flashing, whereas, as Harry said, a headlight on an owl or a flash on an owl will blind that animal for half an hour, which affects its feeding time, basically. So, don't do it, is the bottom line. Don't use flash. And I'm sure there's some people out there that will say, it doesn't matter once or twice. No, it does matter, so don't do it. You don't need to do it with modern technology.
So first three stories we can wrap up in saying don't be an idiot, from the selfies to the drone pilot to taking shots of wild animals with a flash. What about story number 4, James or Harry? This is a bit more photography related directly. The world's highest resolution full frame sensor apparently has been unveiled. Who wants to give a bash on this one?
Well, I'll weigh in first. And I have seen and read this. This immediately caught my eye when it was announced a few weeks ago, and always going to make news when you get a little bit of a clickbaity headline: world's highest resolution full frame sensor. So it isn't an ordinary 35mm sized sensor, but rather than what do they top out at the moment, a full frame camera, 50, 60 megapixels on one of the Sonys, I think now. This has 410, which is a pretty ludicrous amount of resolution, especially packed onto just a full frame sensor. So ordinarily you would have had to go into medium format and large format. So the resolution that offers over what we've currently got is mind-bogglingly larger than sort of current 8 and 12K standards, but it currently is not going to be something that we see in general commercial applications, so your day-to-day cameras. The cost to make something like this, I imagine, is phenomenal. So it's primarily aimed at medical grade imaging and industrial kind of users that need that super high resolution. But we always see this kind of tech coming to those industries first. So who knows, in another 5 or 10 years, you might be able to go out to Jessop's probably won't be around in another 10 years.
Will not be.
You'll be able to order it online at Amazon. There we go, that's better.
Or pop into Ford's.
Ford, yeah, they'll definitely still be around. In another 5-10 years, we might be having 100 megapixel plus 200, 300, 400 sensors available for just...
What do you reckon is going to be the people who's going to want to use these? Is it going to be your Astros, your Macros, your what? Just anybody?
I would use it.
What would you use it for, James, in particular?
Architecture and commercial use. So shooting industrial type stuff.
And because what, you can crop better?
Yeah, a little bit of cropping, but you could just do so much with it. I mean, I use a 50 megapixel camera at the moment. There's always room for more pixels in what I do, but it's quite specific what I do in terms of architectural stuff like that. Or, as I said, industrial things where you potentially, the enlargements are enormous and I need real sharpness along sort of edges at the... from front to, I don't know, so you've got a piece of machinery at the front of the frame, you've got another at the back, and I want real, pixel sharpness, and I want to be able to work on individual areas of that frame in post-production as well. So
okay, so for that kind of thing,
pixels you have. So for that kind of thing, and I would be quite happy to pay quite a considerable amount of money for that, because it would make my life quite a lot easier. Processing it and handling it and storing all the frames from it might up the storage cost.
It'll lead to more warehouses, James, and it'll lead to more work for you photographing those warehouses.
It would lead to more data centres, you mean? Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
So there you go. It's all good for James. What about you, Harry? Would you find it useful?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, for just pure wildlife applications, the cropping power would be unbelievable, and that's always a good thing when you're shooting, coming back to being, common sense and handling wildlife photography. What we don't want to do is get super close and disturb wildlife. And so it's a balance of getting the right viewpoint for your subject. If you're very, very far away from your subject and it's close to a backdrop, it's never going to produce the right kind of photograph. But if I can space myself away from a subject and get outside of its potential circle of fear, we would call it, this area where the animal is not going to behave naturally, and great. So if I can crop an image 2, 3, 400% or more, which you would be able to do with this and still produce a high-res photograph and print it large, then man, the possibilities expand. It's always the case with something like this. So it will be quite interesting to see how that moves in sort of the coming years.
Yeah, I think they'll probably have to do some work on dynamic range to do with it, I would imagine.
Noise as well, I would imagine, packing that many.
Noise, yeah, in the real world, as it were. So out of controlled situations, I'd be using it in controlled situations, but for what Harry was talking about with wildlife, I suspect there's quite a long way. And then heat management, and then putting it in some form of body, memory cards alongside it, battery power alongside it. So there's a long way to go before we see this any time soon, I would imagine, anyway.
I mean, this is from Canon, so you never know. If we stick on the podcast for another few years, we might be talking about it again in Does the World Really Need This, if it's actually out on the market. Like I said, you can get more information on all of these stories in the show notes, so do feel free to check those out. But we are going to move on to something which I am sure you've all been waiting for.
The Photography Online Podcast Quiz.
Well, welcome back to the Pop Quiz. That's the Photography Online Podcast Quiz, where I ask our two panellists some photography-related questions, and you can play along, of course, at home as well, or in the car, wherever you are, walking the dog. The answers will not be revealed until the end. Now, James won our first ever Pop Quiz back in January, so he'll be feeling pretty good. Pretty confident, James, do you reckon?
Oh, and I was cheated out of a point.
Oh, don't keep banging on about that. You won by a couple of points anyway against Marcus, who's failed the last two podcast
Yeah, but he was
quizzes.
Humiliated, and I could have completely humiliated, destroyed his ego.
Give it time. Harry, this is your first time. How are you feeling?
I'm quite nervous, actually. I do like a good quiz, and I'm quite competitive. So if I lose to the likes of sort of James there, I'm going to be...
What do you mean to the likes?
Bit of trash talk going on already. I like this. Nick was very nervous last month, I got to say, and he was thrilled by the end of it, having beaten Marcus by, I think, as I recall, quite some margin. So let me just remind you how it works. There will be 5 rounds. Every round is worth a point for the correct or the closest answer. In the event of a tie, both of you will receive that point. The winner gets absolutely nothing. So without further ado, let's play.
Round 1. Multiple choice.
Okay, so this round I'm going to ask you a question which is pretty difficult, so to help you out there are 4 possible answers. All you need to do is tell me which one you think is correct. So here's the question. According to Canon, how many actuations will their flagship R1 camera do before you should get the camera serviced? Is it A, 120,000, B, 200,000, C, 300,000, or D, 400,000?
So it's not how many it's rated at before it just breaks.
No, how many they advise, basically before they get a
By
service.
an authorised Canon service centre. It's probably 5 actuations, then take it in for a service.
Yeah, so you're right. It's not before it breaks, it's before they advise. Kind of like your car, get a service after 6 weeks and then, yeah.
And I presume you came up with, there's a right answer and you came up with the other one, so I've got to get in your mind.
Yeah, well, let's not give you any more clues. So as long as you've got an answer, A, B, C or D, or the number, we'll come back.
Hang on.
So, you got one, Jim? Good grief. How long does it take to
I'm writing A,
write?
B, C, D now. Okay.
Right, this is confusing. Okay, let's move on to our next round.
Round 2. Name the year.
Okay, in this round, the answer to the question is a year. The round will go to whoever gets the closest answer. But if either of you give me the exact year, I will give you a bonus point, which I'm sure James would let me forget. Okay, here's the question. Ansel Adams was born on the 20th of February, but in which year?
Good Lord.
James, you look like you're about to, I don't know what, give birth to something.
James, when were you born? It must be around then.
Yeah, very amusing.
Blimey.
Oh, look at this. Hands on head. James, it looks like he's just turned bright red. Chewing the pen, honestly.
No, the funny thing is that I do a lot of quizzing with my boy, and this actually came up not that long ago, but because I'm a goldfish, I can't remember.
Yeah. Well, the last couple of months, the podcast, there was 2 questions, I think, that were linked to things Marcus had actually done features around and spoken about not far around that, and then he got them both wrong, so...
Yeah, well, it's age.
Yeah, so there you go. Ansel Adams' birth year. Have you both got something?
I mean, we were talking about Ansel Adams on our live show, and so Marcus sort of has given me a hint just with some of the books he was talking about, so I've just worked backwards from that.
Okay, right. It's closest, so don't worry. The closest you'll get a point. If you get it exact, you'll get the bonus point. So let's move on to round 3.
Round 3. Artificial intelligence.
Okay, so this is an interesting one. In this round, I asked ChatGPT to describe a photographic object, person, or practice without mentioning the name of it. All I need you to do is tell me, what did I ask it to talk about? This is a little bit longer. It's about 30 seconds. Okay, so there's plenty of information in here. So I'll play this for you now.
A keen observer with an eye for fleeting moments, this individual blends seamlessly into a crowd, capturing the raw emotions and unscripted interactions that make each gathering unique. They craft visual stories that preserve the essence of a day filled with love and connection. Their work requires patience, quick reflexes, and the ability to anticipate meaningful exchanges before they happen. Balancing artistry with technical skill, they ensure that every detail, from the smallest gestures to the grandest displays of affection, is immortalized with care and precision.
Not too difficult, I don't think. Look at that.
That's easy peasy lemon squeezy.
Harry was writing frantically very quickly.
I was worried about this. I'd listened to the other quizzes, and it was the other ones were tough. I didn't get last month's one, for example.
They will vary. They will vary. But you might be right, you might be wrong. You never know. Okay, let's move on to round 4.
Round 4. Take a wild guess.
All right, well, as the name suggests, this round requires an answer which could be almost anything, so you are unlikely to be able to get it exact. So you will need to take a wild guess. As with round 2, the point will go to whoever gets the closest to the answer. It is unlikely, but if one of you does get the exact answer, there are 2 bonus points, James. Okay, how many new cameras did Canon sell in 2023, which is the most recent data that we have? And there are no multiple choices here, so we're giving you got to take a wild guess, basically. New cameras, 2023.
Oh, geez, oh.
Is this all cameras, Ruth? This is not just...
No, just Canon's new cameras.
Canons.
Canons,
okay.
yeah.
Who goes first in answering this, by the way? Because this is tactical. Because it's nearest then.
Well, no. Do you mean to say that you would change your answer based on what the first person said? James McCormick.
I might.
Where's your-
No, come on, I want to see you writing a figure down, and then you've got to hold that up. I don't trust him now.
All right.
If we were actually in a real place together, we could actually take the envelopes from each other and, secure.
All right. Well, I'll write down a clear feel. I am writing things down.
We're trusting your integrity and your honesty in this round.
Okay.
Okay, James has written something. Closest, remember, just the closest. If you listen to the podcast over the last few months, we will have talked camera sales in general, so you might have a rough idea of what it could be.
I remember the news stories, but I can't remember any of the figures.
I think they sold about 50% of the market, maybe more.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Maybe 55, 60?
Right, they've got something, so let's go on to our final round.
Round 5. Where in the world?
Okay, so this final round is as much a geography question as it is a photography one. The location will typically be a well-known hotspot, Harry, for photography. So here is the question. It's a wee bit longer. The tallest mountain in the world is generally thought of as being Mount Everest. However, it's only the tallest above sea level. If you measure the height of a mountain as the difference between its base and its peak, there is a taller mountain which draws photographers from all over the world. However, it is generally only visible for around 100 days of each year. But where is it?
I know this.
And I could, you know this, James? I was going to say, I can give you a clue.
Well, this is an interesting one, because I'm presuming you mean...
Hey, careful now.
Because
Don't give any...
I think the tallest mountain is in the sea, I think. I'm watching Harry because I can see him on there.
No, you're right. There is something under the sea which,
But that technically, but I don't think we're counting that. So in which case, I definitely know because I've been there.
Okay, all right. No clue required. Excellent. Okay, round 5 answers have been...
Oh, is there a clue?
Well, there was a clue, but you both seem pretty confident, so I'm going to pull it away.
Well, can you read the question again, just for the benefit of our audience, of course?
No, I was going to give you a clue, which I haven't said. But
Oh.
I shan't, because you both seem quite happy. Right, so you got all 5 potential
But
answers.
what about the audience? They might want a clue.
Might they? So you've suddenly gone from being very confident to, no, it's for her over there. No, you're good. I think you've got a question and you got an answer. Are you happy, James? Do you want that read again?
Do I have to write it down? No, I'll write it down then.
Okay, just in case you forget. You've got memory like a goldfish, remember?
I do,
I've forgotten that already. All right, let's go for our answers. Question 1 for round 1. According to Canon, how many actuations with their flagship R1 camera should you have, or should you get, or do, whatever, before you get the camera serviced? The answers were A, 120,000, B, 200,000, C, 300,000, or D, 400,000. Who has got an answer? Let's go first, James.
Well, just because it's a camera manufacturer, I reckon it's something ridiculous. So I'm going to go A, because I just think they want you to service their cameras all the time.
Okay. And to Harold?
Well, I went for C, 300,000, because I thought, well, it's not... older pro-level cameras were rated for sort of at least 500,000 minimum actuations. I reckon it was a lot more. And so I thought, well, that's kind of a good sort of not even halfway mark to maybe what it's possible of doing before it might need having a look at. So, I don't know. Literal guess.
It's a fair shout, to be honest. I wish I'd thought of that. Yeah, no, I just thought 100 because I thought it was the sort of number Ruth wouldn't come up with. So
okay, there's the thought process towards 2 inaccurate answers. The answer was actually B, 200,000. Canon claims their shutter is reliable until at least 200,000 actuations. So nil point in round 1 for both of you.
Excellent.
Congratulations. Good start. At least you're both on a parallel now. Round 2, name the year. I asked you which year was Ansel Adams born on. Either of you. So it needs to be closest to.
I'm pretty sure he was born on the dot of 1900.
Okay, James, 1900. Harold?
Well, so I'm close because Marcus was talking about Ansel Adams' well-known books on our live show and said they were published in the 80s. And I know that he died not long after writing those. So I don't think he could have lived much more than, 80-something years old. Well, I mean, being a bloke anyway, we just die quicker, don't we? So... so I went for 1902. So I mean, it's right. I like round numbers don't sit well with me, so I didn't go for like the 18.
I think he might be right.
1899 or something, or 1900 would be too coincidental.
Yeah, but Harry, the only reason I'd remember anything is if it was on the money. Otherwise, I wouldn't remember. So I'm sure I don't know. Anyway, come on, put us out of our misery, Ruth.
Harry, bang on. 2 points. You got the bonus point as well. Yeah, 1902. I mean, if you'd said like 1905, like James would have got that closest, but no, James looking devastated down there in the corner. Nicely done, Harry, for your first one. All right, round 3, artificial intelligence, where I asked ChatGPT to describe a photographic something, shall we say. I played that clip for you. What do we reckon it was?
It's a wedding photographer, surely.
Yeah, wedding photographer.
Okay. Yes, you did both get that. So, point for each of you. One for James, one for Harry.
Nick would have got that question, wouldn't he?
I'm sure he would have, James. Let's not go down that route. Okay, round 4 was take a wild guess. I asked how many new cameras did Canon sell in 2023? So you have to get closest, and if you do get it bang on, you get 2 extra bonus points, but I don't think there's much odds of that. What do we reckon? Harry, go on, you go.
Well, yeah, it was just a wild, like 4.76 million. I mean, just...
Specific, but wild, yes, okay, yeah.
Well, 4.
4, James is going for 4.
4
4
million.
million.
Gone for a round number.
He has gone for a round number.
Well, because I'm not a weirdo.
Bit harsh. Weirdo worked for Harry a couple of rounds back. He's forgotten already. All right, James actually is closest there. It was 3.34 million. You're both very close. I'm quite impressed. So James gets the single point for that. And let's move on to our final question, which was where in the world. We were talking about the tallest mountain between base and peak, as opposed to the very top one you could touch if you were up that high. And you both did not need the clue. So what do we reckon it was?
It's Mount McKinley, or it's in now Denali, in Denali National Park in Alaska.
Yeah.
Okay, you are both right. Now known again as Mount McKinley. Denali, just give you some fun information here, it comes from a native Alaskan language. It means the tall one. And when measured from its absolute base, it is almost 5,500 feet taller than Mount Everest. Denali's base actually sits 2,000 feet above sea level and rises 18,000 feet, while Everest actually begins on a 14,000 feet high plain and then summits 29,000. So if you do all that, you may not have known, or you may have, in 1906, an explorer called Dr. Frederick Cook, he claimed to have climbed Denali by faking a photo showing his climbing companion Edward at the summit. However, his ascent was publicly challenged when they reckon somebody came clean basically and said they hadn't done it. And there was an uncropped version that was actually released in 1997 of the summit, showing a previously hidden detail. It actually shows it was taken on a little promontory now known as Fake Peak, which was 14,000 feet below the summit. So it was actually summited properly in 1913, but yeah, Fake Peak. So
I did not know that. That's a great fact.
That was quite interesting.
Great fact. So another good fact for you, Ruth, is on the live show we like to get people from all over the world, and indeed we're trying to tick off the varying states of the United States, aren't we?
We are indeed, yes.
And we're after Alaska, aren't we? Well, Marks and I have 2 friends in Alaska, and their daughter is called Denali.
Oh, really?
Because she was made, shall we say, in Denali National Park.
I'm not sure that was something I should have gone out on the podcast, but good to know. Right. It's a nice name, and now spoken by, I don't know, those who dare. Anyway, the points on the quiz. Harry gets 4, James gets 3. Congratulations, Harry.
Beginner's luck.
You won your first ever.
I thought it was a draw. My maths is out.
No, it's not. Harry got the extra point for getting the
point.
exact year on Adam's birth. See? You're quick enough when it's your extra point that's been missed. But anyway, there we go. Missing extra points again. James, congrats, Harry. Harry and Nick and James. So far, the only one not to have won a quiz is Marcus, who has played 2.
Look at his face. I'd slap it if it wasn't.
If it wasn't what? So handsome,
well, if
so,
he wasn't
far away, so unlikely.
If I could reach.
Yeah, exactly.
I've never seen him look so pleased with himself.
I'm very happy. It's made my day, that.
I know.
The Photography Online, or the pop quiz as we're calling it, the Photography Online podcast quiz, will be back in our next podcast. Hope you enjoyed playing along at home. If you did manage to score higher than Harry, do let us know what score you got. And also, if you'd like to submit any questions for any of the rounds, do by all means do that. We've got a dedicated email address now for the podcast, which is podcast@mc2photography.com.
The Photography Online podcast, in partnership with Kingjoy Tripods.
Okay, so we're really excited to have Kingjoy helping us make this year's shows possible. As I mentioned last month, we approached Kingjoy because we all use their products. We wanted to have a brand that we can get behind, and we're really happy to have them supporting this podcast. Harry has been using one of their, shall we call them, speciality tripods for quite a long time now. Harry, what is the one that you're most frequently seen with?
Or not seen with, funnily enough.
Or not seen, I should say, yeah.
It's their camo tripod, so it's it's a C86, but it's the camo edition. And I've been using those for at least 3 years, I think more. I've had two versions of it because they updated it and sent me the newer one, and the newer one I've had for about 3 years. And I love it. I mean, it's incredibly sturdy. So and it is relatively heavy compared to some of the smaller versions that they do. But because I'm using it with big lenses some of the time on big uneven ground, it does not move. You know, when I'm entirely confident going out and using that in 70, 80 mile an hour winds, the likes we get on the Outer Hebrides on Skye during the winter. And I didn't know, actually. I spoke to somebody from Kingjoy recently because I didn't know how they put the camo cover on. I didn't know if it was just like a wrap, but it's hydro dipped. So, you know, in a big vat, and they dip the tripod in and it sticks on there. So it's quite an expensive process, hence why the camo version is a little pricier than the ordinary version, but it's really durable. I mean, as most people know, I'm not entirely that careful with my equipment, and even me dragging it around, clunking over rocks, it's fallen off a cliff in St Kilda, and I've only lost the odd sort of small mark on the actual camo covering of the tripod. It's otherwise completely intact, and which I was really surprised about because I just thought it was going to immediately peel off when I was given that. So yeah, I'm pretty pleased with the results. All
right, well, if you're interested in getting your hands on the same tripod that Harry uses, or seeing what else is available in Kingjoy's professional lineup, do check out the Photography Online shop if you're in the UK, or go to kingjoy.com for international sales or to find your nearest dealer. All right, well, let's move on.
Listeners from an unlikely location.
Yeah, we like to say hello to listeners from unexpected parts of the world. One listener has got in touch via email. This is D. Lima, J. Stephen. He says, I've been an early subscriber to Photography Online and a listener to the podcast from its inception. Both platforms are quite informative and an invaluable educational resource in my photography journey. My primary interest is landscape photography. I hope to join you guys in one of your workshops. This is to inform you you have a loyal listener and subscriber to both of your platforms from St. Lucia. Thank you for the continued exceptional and educational programs, so that's cool. St. Lucia, either of you guys ever been over that way? I hear lovely things. No.
Never. No, it sounds lovely.
Been to the Caribbean. I haven't been to St. Lucia itself, I don't think.
Yeah, well, thanks very much for getting in touch, De Lima. This month's listeners from an unlikely location, though, is going to the one person who is listening in Iran. So, wow. Salam, I think, to you if you're in Iran. But wherever you're listening from, we are very glad, of course, to have you as part of our worldwide audience. Do get in touch. Tell us about yourself. We're always interested who is listening and where from. As I said, email podcast@mc2photography.com or leave a comment on whatever platform you're listening on. We did have a few comments, in fact, speaking of, on last month's podcast. This is from Joe BNX1. He says, I enjoy your shows. You express your thoughts and opinions without, it appears, any censorship. There is no one editing out comments or statements that might upset some listeners. I don't always agree with you, but that means it's interesting. You do you, folks. Don't let naysayers change your format. I think that was maybe in light of several naysayers we had.
Yeah, Marcus.
Possibly Marcus is the uncensored one. Believe it or not, it is slightly edited. So I dread to think what the unadulterated format the comments would get on that. Keith Harrison, 1383. We were mentioning last week about books. He said, I've got a couple of book suggestions for you. Stories Behind the Images by Corey Rich and It's What I Do by Lindsay Adario. Both really good, and also come as audio books for those who get bored reading, which may be talking about Marcus, who, when we were mentioning this last month, he just said he struggles to read in general. It sends him to sleep. But if you are one of our Photography Online official supporters, maybe you watched our live show recently, we talked a little bit more about this as well. And obviously we heard last month from James and Marcus. Harry, have you got any books in particular that kind of stick out to you as really useful, informative, or something that's just really maybe impacted you in your photography journey?
I do, yeah. I've got a couple of things I would definitely recommend, and I've never been one to buy coffee table books and big photography books generally. Some of them are beautiful and the imagery in them is fantastic. I just always found it was one of those things that you generally have, and then you look at it once and it then sits on a shelf and doesn't get looked at again. But I got bought as a gift a really big photo book from a Canadian wildlife photographer called Paul Nicklin. I really recommend looking him up. And that the imagery in there is something I do go back to look at, both from a photographical point of view and a zoological, just interest in animals. They're really amazing captures of behaviour and portraits. I've got a huge amount of respect for him. He's, in my view, one of the only photographers out there who is kind of doing what many wildlife photographers claim to be doing, which is kind of trying to use photography to make a difference. He is an active conservationist. He does a lot of work trying to protect our polar regions and our oceans. He has a sort of charity and a foundation that he works with to do that. He's sold all sorts. I could go on and on. And so,
does he use flash, Harry?
Well, in his underwater stuff, he will do, because it's necessary. But I don't believe he does with his anything above water. But it's kind of some of it's really highly processed imagery, which is quite unusual to see with wildlife photography, but it has a very distinctive look. So I find that quite sort of inspirational. Maybe not the right word, but certainly it kind of gives me hope that somebody is doing a little bit of good with some of their photographs. But yeah, I don't have many actual coffee table photo books, and so what I do like to read is just accounts from other photographers. So I've got two that I really have enjoyed and will be rereading probably very soon, because I got them off the shelf and I looked at them and go, I really enjoyed that, I'm going to read that again. So one is called An Eye for a Bird by Eric Hosking, which James and I bonded over in our interview might not be the right word, gauntlet or initiation. And
what did he make you do, Harry?
Basically, I'll say, because it was great to meet Harry that day, and he was very punctual. So when we met for the first time, turned up on time, big tick. Walked into a park in London, a place called Richmond Park, and there was a very rare duck in the middle of the lake, and it was quite a long way off. And I just pointed and went, "What's that duck?" And he went, "It's a male smew." And that was that.
That was that. You're hired.
But yeah, we did talk a bit. I remember distinctly talking about this, which is an autobiography by Eric Hosking, who is not a really that familiar name in wildlife photography, but he was really sort of the pioneer, if not the original bird photographer in
the UK, certainly,
in Britain, yeah. And his work was outstanding. I haven't really read or come across anyone that really had the same level of patience that he must have done. Everybody that met him and worked with him and sat with him was just astounded by his ability to get into a photography hide, or blind if you're in the States, and just sit and pretty much become a statue, unmoving. Even I can't just kind of sit there and be completely still. You'll always have a little shuffling, but apparently he would just go immobile and just wait. But the title of the book comes from, I don't think really it's a spoiler, he lost one of his eyes while photographing tawny owls down in England. And about the whole story behind that encounter, just unbelievable. So if you're vaguely interested in nature, wildlife or bird photography, to kind of hear how it was done with medium and large format film, just amazing. And it's still got results that you could look at today and are published. And the other book is on a similar theme. It's an African photographer called Greg du Toit, Toit is Toit, called Wilderness Dreaming, and just goes right in behind his whole journey from starting off in reserve management and Botswana and South Africa through to becoming a award-winning wildlife photographer. And again, the dedication and the work that went into some of his photographs is just beyond the pale of most things that I see or hear these days. And again, starting off on sort of older film cameras and his transition into digital as well. And that's a really nice, almost informal look at photography work. So even if you're just interested in Africa and wildlife and sort of almost behind the scenes of these safari lodges, it's a really interesting insight.
Excellent. Well, we're going to put in show notes, I think, for these. We don't usually do this kind of thing, but we'll put links to the books that Harry's talking about. And James, have you got any down there as well?
Well, without sort of repeating too much, I mean, I could wax lyrical about Eric Hosking forever, because he shaped my childhood. A book about the birds' nests, and I know we shouldn't disturb them, but I was from a time in the 70s when things weren't quite so informed or enlightened, shall we say, but he produced a book about birds' nests, and that lived with me from, 5 years old till I just discovered girls at 6 years old. So it completely changed my life, that book, and it really did. And I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today if I hadn't seen that book. But he was also he worked alongside or had an association with a chap called Bramwell Evans. So we will put all this in the show notes, so I'll send it through to you, Ruth. And he was known as Romany of the BBC, and he was a forerunner of David Attenborough, and he would tour around. He was actually, I think, a vicar and a Romany, so Romany gypsy, and he would tour around the countryside taking pictures. He would tour around speaking to the locals, the gamekeeper, the poacher, all different angles of society about the natural world. So, and he would broadcast that on the BBC long before, on the radio, that is, long before Attenborough came along. But Attenborough's career was very much shaped by him. So he produced a series of books. So they're big ones, slightly more sort of back to the African theme and back to what I believe are good books to read before you go to a specific location is, Marcus was mentioning in the previous podcast about novels not being his kind of thing, but there is a sort of halfway house. So something like Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad's a very inspiring book for me before, I went to Congo, for example. So, I think you can get a good feel of a place by reading these sorts of books, be they historical or be they somewhat more contemporary. You can develop an impression, and then that when you actually turn up to take pictures of the landscapes, the people, the wildlife, whatever it might be in any location, you're not skewed by actual imagery. So I almost won't look at pictures of where I'm going or what it is I want to do. I don't mind looking at art and paintings of it. That's a very different thing. So that's another thing that I will do. But reading people's accounts of these places, then taking pictures, is the way that I would go about it. But interestingly, once I'm back from somewhere, or once I've been somewhere a few times, then I don't mind looking at pictures of it, and I think, oh, wish I'd done that, or wish I'd gone there. Or so, I don't know. I just find that photography books themselves, a bit like Harry said with coffee table books, they can be a bit daunting. A coffee table book, is a once in a lifetime shot, or somebody who sat there for weeks on end waiting for the light to be correct, or the animal to be in a right position, or somebody to be doing something specific. So, and you might not have that opportunity. So they can be a bit daunting from that point of view. So, and misleading in many ways as well. So so art and a combination of literature is the way I would go.
What I quite like about coffee table books is not so much, I enjoy them, but then if you put them somewhere that other people can look at them, if they're in having a cup of tea, they can flip them over. If they're not photographers, it doesn't matter, they're not daunted, they're just enjoying the pictures. And if you watch the live show, you'll have seen a couple of the ones that I enjoy. But we're going to put the notes for these, links to these rather, in the show notes, so do check them out. And if you've got any as well that particularly spoke to you, ones that you really enjoy, we did put a social media post up on our Facebook and Instagram recently. Do feel free to add to that and share your favourites with some other people. Just regarding the photography online, the main show, a couple of comments we had regarding that. Simon Meads 1886 said, having been a bit critical of last month's episode, I want to say this time it was superb. I am pleased the challenge is so far less silly than last year's in the way it's presented. I know. Don't think they liked our acting last year. Nothing wrong with a bit of humour though. Marcus's very big camera section was excellent. And Happy Mystic 9800, this was also regarding the very big camera section, said, sports photography with that monster. Don't say it out too loud, Ruth might be listening, and have you guys another challenge, which does actually appeal to me quite a lot. We had a lot of comments actually, unusually I would say, about the Analog Affairs section on the show last month. It was great. Marcus was out with his very large camera, as everyone was saying. People seem to very much enjoy that. If you haven't watched it yet, we were also doing a section on buying and selling used gear, which was really, really good, really informative. And our challenge, of course, we were at a lighthouse trying to get a shot. They are so far failing slightly miserably, I would say. They're like two episodes in and they've had 2 shots, and they could have had 4 shots. They could have had 5. They've got 2. So if you're not familiar with the challenge, I'm not going to explain it now. Go back and watch that and see how they're getting on. Anyway, always appreciate the feedback. Do keep it coming. Podcast at mc2photography.com. We are going to move into our next section.
It may be new, it may even be exciting, but does the world really need it?
All right, well, let's talk gear and stuff that aspires to be gear. First up, Harry, what have we got?
We've got, well, it's not a product just yet. It is a rumour, but is something that I think probably will become a tangible product very, very soon. It's the Canon V1, which is an expansion into their compact camera range. And I've kind of missed the resurgence of the compact camera market because, yes.
Well, just keep missing it for about another year, Harry, and then you'll be back on track because it'll have gone by then.
Yeah,
so.
And it'll disappear again. No, I mean, yeah, I've seen a few new releases. One of them, the Fuji, whatever it's called, XV100, which kind of took social media by storm, has become a real TikTok popular camera. I think that's where a lot of it is coming from. And obviously, Canon is going to want to capitalize on that, which is where I think this camera is going to come from. And Canon has always been really strong in the compact camera market, but we haven't seen a new camera in their PowerShot lineup for 5 or 6 years at least. It's certainly pre-COVID, as far as I know. A compact camera with a big zoom range, and I think hopefully that's what this V1 is going to do for Canon. And I think they're going to want to see real financial benefit from a camera like this. Whether we need it, it's probably going to have something like 24 megapixels. I don't know what the supposed zoom range is meant to be, but possibly with a slightly larger than traditional sensor, so maybe more towards the micro four thirds size sensor, rather than, I think normally a compact camera's got about a 1-inch sensor, so that might really benefit a little bit of its noise performance and quality in low light as well. But whether it's going to offer anything different from sort of stuff that's available, I don't really know yet. We don't know enough about it. I think what really surprises me is the cost of some of these compact cameras. A lot of them are well above £1,000 or $1,000, and you're already getting into the realms of basic full frame and crop sensor mirrorless cameras for that price.
The point and shoots are, because the idea, I think we've been talking about this quite a lot recently, and lots of people are buying them used because they're not available anymore, and it's the proper old school point and shoot digital cameras, which people are snapping up for around about £100 because they look retro. I mean, they are old enough now to be retro. This, I know the X100 and stuff, but it's more, it's a really good quality. I think Canon are trying to fill this gap in the market. They don't have anything new that is typically old school point and shoot. If they're going to be that expensive, I mean, that's the people it's aimed at, which is, I think, Gen, whatever they are now, Gen Z, they want them not so much for photographic quality as to be seen with. Yeah. I'm not saying everybody is, but if they're going to be pricing them up that kind of area, they're going to completely miss the market.
There's a big variation in the market, of course. I mean, Kodak brought a little compact one out last year. I can't remember the name of it. picks something, and that's only a couple of £100, I believe. And so it is really aimed at the sort of basic end of the market. But even Canon's previous PowerShot cameras, which are say 5-6 years old now, are still going for £700-800 as sort of new cameras. So I don't imagine this new V1 camera is going to be priced any lower than that. And the Fuji, well, I can't remember, X100, whatever it's called, is £1,500-1,800. I mean, it's a really expensive camera. So for me personally, I would think, well, what I don't see what I'm getting over the equipment I've already got, or really just using my phone.
Yeah. I don't think you're who it's aimed at particularly. I think it's
exactly. This is just not my kind of area. So does the world really need it? Probably not. But I mean, there's going to be somebody that's really happy with that product.
James?
Well, there's 2 or 3 things that come to mind with it. Firstly, putting aside the cost, if it enthuses people to get into photography, that's great. So that's point one. If it makes Canon or the other brands that make them, these little point-and-shoot cameras, money in the interim period before they become out of fashion again, that's also great, because we want Canon, Nikon, Fuji, all of these, Sony, all these manufacturers to succeed. The thing about this particular model that I find disappointing is, and I haven't looked at any of the specs, I don't know anything about it, except it doesn't have a viewfinder on it. And that means that you then have to make, I believe, am I right in saying that, Harry, or have I got that wrong?
We don't know for sure, but it's very likely, there's very few compact cameras that...
It doesn't look like it anyway, from the pictures of it, yeah. So not having a viewfinder means that, once again, having said that it'll enthuse people into photography, I hope it does, but you're making all your judgments based upon a couple of inches of LCD on the back, rather than putting your eye to the camera, feeling it against your face and looking through it, which I know that would be an electric viewfinder, which is not ideal, but it is the way where we are in photography these days. So, but it's still better than no viewfinder at all. That connection, holding it close to you, seeing what you're actually doing, rather than making a judgment on a tiny little LCD. So it's a shame it doesn't have that. So, and that is about all I have to say on it.
I don't think that would be much of a problem.
But it is, Harry. It's people holding them at distance in front of them and then squinting in daylight.
But they want these early digital cameras, and the joy of the early digital cameras was the novelty of the screen. There's like a generation who did not know a viewfinder.
But the screen's just for review. It's not for composition.
But I think like the people this is aimed at, they're not that interested in that. It's just they want them.
Yeah, a younger generation won't even use...
Well, I'll revert to my previous point then. I hope it gets people into photography and makes the manufacturers some money. Fine.
Ooh, he's in a wee bit of a straw. I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry. Anyway, let's move on to a different item, having decided that some of the world would want a Canon V1. And we will come back if this actually comes onto the market. We'll let you know if it does have a viewfinder, or how much the price tag is on that. Some new bags are out, James, which I think you're quite excited about.
I do for bags what Imelda Marcos did for shoes, Ruth. And what you do for hair straighteners. We've got lots of them, don't we? So, but anyway, back to ThinkTank, who I'm a huge fan of and have been long before we ever did the podcasts or the show or anything like that, because they just make really high quality stuff, basically. And this is called I think we've got 2 bags that we're going to talk about here. Is that correct?
We've got a couple of different new bags,
A couple of different ones, that they brought out. So this is an Airport Navigator V2. It's actually a roller bag, but it's kind of a half-size roller bag, really. So what it takes is 2 lenses with bodies attached and some peripheral bits and pieces, a couple of other lenses. So it's a relatively small bag, and the V1 has 1 set of wheels on it, so you tip it up and roll it along. So if you're travelling through airports, it's quite good and useful, but you've always got to slightly drag it behind you. And what ThinkTank have done is put a second set of wheels on this, basically. So now you can wheel it to the side of you or in front of you. And they say it's aimed at wedding photographers and things like that. But if you don't need your camera bag on your shoulders and you tend to wheel things, which is what I do, mainly because I have a bad back and I travel through airports a fair amount, or I'm doing architectural stuff, or I'm travelling through cities, then this is absolutely ideal. It'll just wheel next to you, and it's a tiny little change that's going to make a huge difference. So the 4 wheels to the 2 wheels is absolutely brilliant. So if you're not hiking in the countryside, which I know many of our listeners do, then I would recommend a bag like this because it'll be fantastic. It's $350, which is a little expensive, but you know what? Most things are expensive these days. So
It's worth it for the 4-wheel drive.
I think if you don't have one already, I mean, would I upgrade mine? Probably not for $350, but why not? And the other thing that ThinkTank do, which I discovered and I didn't know, is that the wheels failed on my other one, and somebody who knows how to use Twitter or X tweeted them, and they sent me some new wheels. How about that?
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. I couldn't believe it.
You will never get the new set of your suitcase will never fall apart. You'll get fresh wheels when they fall.
It will never fall apart.
Someone needs to gift James an extra wheeled one.
I just can't speak highly enough about their products, really. So, and that leads very nicely onto the dark light, which is slightly more up Harry Street, really.
This is not the backlight, this is the dark light. So what's this?
The dark light, yes.
Brand new range?
It looks like it, yeah, and it does look right. I saw some of the announcement posts and teasers they were doing on social media ahead of this, and it looked quite interesting. And it's a small tactical style looking backpack, so a kind of this Molly laser cut grid where you can hook attachments on. And so they're doing this in 2 sizes, a 14 litre and a 20 litre, which has generally always been much smaller than backpacks I've used. But same as James, I've used ThinkTank bags for a long, long time. Big fan of them. I've made small deviations away from them to other brands and then always come back because the other brands either fail me, are uncomfortable, don't do the job, and ThinkTank is now all I use. And I, at the moment, have got a sort of couple of larger backpacks. So I've got some of the backlight rucksacks, both a 36 and a sort of bigger 40 litre rucksack. And they're great for getting in all the big lenses and loads of equipment, or when I'm out with people I've got to stuff loads of stuff in.
But sometimes, Harry, am I not right in saying that your bag can be too big? Because once you have a big bag, you just put stuff in it.
You do, you stuff it, and even though might only have 1 camera and 1 lens in there, it's still really heavy because I've managed to fill it up. So we've got a couple of trips coming up this year where I don't need a massive backpack. I'm not taking any big lenses. I just need a wide angle. I just need maybe a 70-200, a couple of spare batteries. Namibia, for example, where we're going, one, we're restricted on what we can fly with anyway, weight-wise, and really I don't need that much over there. Just need a couple of basic lenses. And so I'm looking at this and thinking... You're
looking at a new bag, Harry. How many bags have you got?
I'm looking at I have like a big wardrobe, and it's currently overflowing, spilling out onto the floor space of my office.
Yeah, don't go in the cupboard under the stairs in this place either, Ruth. It's a disaster.
They all have uses, and
exactly. I couldn't agree more, Harry.
And so this would have a really specific use case for me. So it's back. It's got the same sort of back panel access as my other rucksacks, which I much prefer because I like to stick my backpack down on, where it might be muddy ground, wet ground. I don't want to get the rucksack straps all dirty. So you can get into it through the back, but also in directly through the top of the rucksack through a pouch as well. So it's got room for 2 camera bodies with lenses. The bigger 20 litre does anyway, which certainly be the one I'm looking at, plus then extra accessories and a few other lenses. So despite being a 20 litre rucksack, it's actually got quite a lot of space in it, as well as another pouch on the front for laptop and accessories and things like that. So especially for just either walking around a city or a short day walk in the countryside, or indeed travelling and maybe flying like I'm looking at doing, this looks like a really good option. And so yeah, I might be placing an order sometime in the next couple of months before we fly out to Africa, just to...
And if we both buy the same one, Harry, this also has Velcro on the outside, so we can put our own patches on.
That's true.
I was going to say, this comes, if you want to look super cool, that ThinkTank, they say there's a free patch with the bag, which does look very cool.
We're going to look very cool. And if you look cool, Ruth, you take better pictures.
But I reckon you should have a big one saying James, and Harry should have a big one saying Harry, and like block letters, and that'll just, at least you can tell them apart then.
Well, they do come in different colours, so So I would obviously have to get the tactical green version, and then there's a nice black version for James, because I know he likes just a plain.
I tell you what, we're not getting written on them though, Ruth, is one that says dad and one that says son, because the last time I was in Africa, everyone thought Harry was my son.
Oh, that would be hilarious.
They also thought he was a girl, didn't they? But he sorted that out ahead of his trip. He's chopped his hair in advance.
Yeah, I've preempted that this time. We're going through the same airport.
Anyway, does the world need it? We reckon they could. ThinkTank bags always really good.
Yes, we always need new bags.
Well, the thing about the both sets is, Ruth, that where things go wrong is wheels, is zips, is waterproofing, and although neither Harry or I have seen these new products, I would be 99% sure that they're up to ThinkTank's usual standards, and the zips, the waterproofing and the wheels will be sturdy.
All right, excellent. Well, in the show notes, if you want to have a look at either of those two new products. This next one is a little bit more random. I've recently been kind of hanging a few things in my office, and I've come across these, which I think I've kind of, these have been around for quite a while, having spoken to, I think, Harry. They're called command strips. They're picture hangers, or you can hang various things up with those, which is, not technically a gear item, I don't suppose, but we've been telling people to print for ages, put them in a frame, stick them on your wall. If you're in a place where you maybe can't nail things in, as I think Harry has that situation in some of his walls, these are designed to basically be non-destructive and yet to hold a very, very good weight. So they're called command strips. Harry, you have had experience of some of these. Are they useful?
They are actually, yeah. I was quite surprised to see it on the talking list this month, but yeah, I think they are really good. It's I say to people, you should always print and get your stuff up on the walls, but even if it's just anything else you need to hang up, they do take a heck of a lot of weight. They are, some of them are rated to up to towards 9 kilograms, so I don't know, 20 pounds. So you can have nice framed prints hanging. And yeah, my house is a weird construction. I've got some walls which you can screw into normally, and just pop a plasterboard fixing in, and then others which are...
And the rest is asbestos and glass.
Well, it is asbestos filled, that's a worry, but it's like cement boards. I literally can't get any screws into it, so I had no option, and until I found these, I wasn't able to get anything up, and so now I've got loads of stuff hanging up on various walls that otherwise I couldn't have done, and especially, if you're just renting and you can't bang stuff into the walls, then they are non-destructive. So as like a photography product, they are actually fantastic.
I mean, there are many, many, many variations of those. I'm sure most of you have heard of them. Like I said, I think I'm a bit late to the party on this one, but we'll put a wee link to those in the show notes. The final item in our gear series, does the world really need this? I'm going to say no in advance on it, but you never know. Harry might have a different opinion. This is what they're calling the Creator Series of SanDisk products. We've all heard of SanDisk, obviously, but Harry, what's the difference here with these?
They're a disgusting shade of blue and purple compared to SanDisk's normal products. They are essentially the same stuff SanDisk have been producing for a few years, just rebadged, recoloured and rebranded for inverted commas creators. And I mean, you can go and read about they basically produced a couple of USBs, an SD card, a micro SD card, and a couple of hard drives, and yeah, kind of rejigged the look of them. They are more expensive than the products which they are based off.
Oh, really?
None of the specs I'm aware are either different or significantly different enough to affect the actual performance of them. So you are literally paying more for a horrible looking product.
It's a nice gender neutral blue into purple into kind of
And that's setting aside all of the issues SanDisk have had recently, just with their SSD drives. 2 of these products are SSD drive based, and SanDisk have been in a lot of hot water over drives that have just spontaneously failed. SSD drives are meant to just be pretty reliable. They've got no moving parts, but SanDisk's ones have had a lot of issues. They've never addressed that publicly. They have just continued to sell those same drives at a discount to new customers without letting on. So there have been lots of people, and people I know that have had drives fail. I would steer clear of anything currently that is SanDisk based. I certainly wouldn't be buying this stuff, which is $100 more expensive than exactly the same.
Is it really? Wow.
Product.
I think it's more than that, actually, Harry, more than $100 more, roughly. I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm reading the prices here. They are extortionately expensive.
Yeah, there are cheaper alternatives. There are more reliable alternatives.
But are there prettier alternatives, Harry?
Well, there are alternatives that don't want me to throw up or have an epileptic fit. So James certainly can't have any of these. They would trigger him immediately. The world really does not need these. It's just an attempt to remarket and cover up some of their previous issues without actually improving or changing anything. I think it's incredibly lazy and misleading. I'm incredibly disappointed for a company that was really the height of professional level equipment 10, 12 years ago, and it's really fallen from grace, in my opinion. So steer well clear is my advice.
All right. Well, the world does not need them, according to Harry. As I say, we will have links to all of these gear items we've been mentioning in our show notes. So do check those out if you fancy the thought of them or just want to see what has turned off Harry so much with the colour, things like that. Have we look at that. Let's move on to our final feature for this month.
Retail regrets. It's only money.
It's only money. This is another feature we introduced back in January where you tell us about photography purchases you've made which have been mistakes in your opinion. Maybe you bought a product which never lived up to what it promised. Maybe you just bought something in a moment of madness that you were never going to use and you've never have. Maybe you've got retail regrets that you can share with the world so that others do not make the same mistakes. We started off in January sharing a couple of our purchases, and last month we were talking about an instant Kodak camera which turned everything purple. That was one of you guys that got in touch. Somebody else got in touch to talk about a flash unit which they had never used. Now, Harry, before we hear from some of our listeners, is there any particular retail regrets that spring to mind, or do you kind of research everything thoroughly and everything you've used?
I'm incredibly careful with kind of spending money. Yeah, I generally don't just make impulse purchases. So I think it's pretty difficult to try and pick something that I ever regret buying or indeed selling. Again, once I have something, I'm pretty sure it's the thing I want to have. And so I don't, certainly not with camera equipment, or generally the accessories I buy is all stuff that I at least kind of think that I am going to use. And I don't regret sort of anything that I've currently got. I'm not sure that extends to the rest of my life. I mean, I certainly regretted cars and other big purchases. But I research everything. So I will spend a year researching something before eventually splashing. So I don't tend to buy something as soon as it comes out, for example.
You're not an impulse buyer then. You did mention once one of the podcasts about there was these vending machines over in Japan that were selling miniature Nikon models. And you said, yeah, definitely. Maybe if it's a small thing, you'd impulse purchase, but not anything more substantial.
Absolutely, yeah. Anything that's a significant investment. Yeah, I work hard for my money. I'm not just going to.
He's certainly not going to make an impulse purchase of buying somebody a pint. That's for sure.
Oh. Well, short arms, deep pockets, as they say.
Like he's feeling bitter about something. Anyway, we did ask you to tell some of yours. David has got in touch. David Dara, he emailed and he said, on the subject of a purchase you wish you didn't make, I'd have to say that I would have to go back to the days with the big swap from film to digital happened. I was new to using Canon EOS cameras, so I made the jump to a 350D from Canon, but quickly found out the Sigma lens I used was on the Canon EF system and they were set up differently from Canon systems, so I was unable to bring them back. That was a big loss to me when I was selling them on. So this is basically, I'm going to assume, no offence David, but maybe not quite as researched as Harry would have done. Made the change there, didn't realise some of his existing kit was not compatible with the new stuff he bought, and so he was feeling very badly about that. I know Harry and James, have you both got mirrorless cameras at this stage? Obviously there's things you can do about that.
I don't use them for stills yet.
Okay.
So I'm yet to make that next leap, and I'm kind of I'm timing it so that I don't have a retail regret, actually. So for me personally, it's not that it's wrong to jump from mirror to mirrorless now, because I don't believe it is for the majority of people. But for me personally, it is not quite the right time, to do with very specific lenses that are available and numbers of actuations in the current mirrored camera I use and things like that. But so I'm just, being careful, doing my research, doing my due diligence before I dip my hand in my pocket. But it will happen. It will.
He's waiting for something that he's going to regret. Does that extend as far as your other things, like your lighting equipment, stuff like that? You never bought anything that you thought, oh, that wasn't... Maybe someone said it was good and then you thought it wasn't. I
think the selling of equipment is the key thing here, really. I don't ever regret buying anything that I can remember, particularly.
Selling?
But I think selling, I kind of wish I'd never sold anything, really.
Don't be a hoarder.
No, not for hoarding reasons, but I think I can't really think of anything that probably wouldn't have at least held or gone up in value, really. Maybe some of the lighting equipment I've sold over the years wouldn't be worth much, but I just think that if you've got the space, keep it and don't sell it. But I don't know. It's such a tricky question I don't know. But personally, I would rather still have some of the cameras that I'd sold in the past.
So we've just done a whole feature on selling equipment, James. So don't.
I know. And I'm saying don't.
Keep it. There'll be lots of partners going, sell it, please.
But it's a hard one. I mean, who knows? Who would have guessed back in the days when our correspondence was swapping over from film to digital that those film cameras he was swapping from would be worth more now than they were then? And I'm pretty sure that's the case. They would have been. But you could never have guessed that at the time.
You can't see the future. And if you hang on to everything, that's going to be possibly unwise as well. Anyway, there's a whole sort of rabbit warren we could go down. I'm sure you guys have got retail regrets, stuff you've sold that you wish you could have back, like James, or maybe stuff that you've bought and you haven't maybe put the research into, or maybe they had good reviews, and like the guy last month who bought the Kodak instant camera and everything came out purple. Maybe it was just a bit of a shock to the system. So do get in touch, let us know. We would love to hear from you. Leave a comment on whatever platform you're listening on, or email podcast@mc2photography.com. We would love to hear from you. All right, well, we're just about to wrap up. We're just going to let you know what you can expect on Photography Online this month on YouTube. We're continuing with the Great British Icons Challenge. We're in month 3. As I mentioned before, they are way behind now, and they're hoping to shoot a steam train this month, which is interesting. It's a moving subject, and if you know anything about this challenge, it's all about timing, and they've got to shoot it at an exact time. So that's going to be an interesting one. We're going to be comparing different print labs here in the UK as well. I'm very much looking forward to this. It's going to be really, really useful information. Nick has gone to, I think, 5 different print labs, and he's got some good information to give to you guys. So that's happening on this month's show, as well as Analog Affairs. We've got a 2-parter coming up. The first part of this month, all about eyeballing exposure. So basically looking at a scene and going, that's f8, 1/30th, whatever, which some people can do. I think more of the people that grew up in film can do that a bit more easy than perhaps some of the more younger digital shooters, but really useful this is going to be. So I'm looking forward to that. That's coming up on this month's YouTube show. So we're going to leave it there for now. James and Harry, thank you for joining us this month. Harry, congratulations on your win. James, commiserations, but you'll have a chance to, I'm sure, make it up again. So far, Marcus is the only big loser on the pop quiz.
That's the only important thing, isn't that right, Harry? That's all that's important.
That is all that matters.
That is all that matters. He's got a chance to redeem himself, I think, possibly next month. But until then, take good care, and most of all, take good photos.
You've been listening to the Photography Online podcast in partnership with Kingjoy Tripods.